Layers and layer masks are really very powerful when it comes to retouching portraits, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. The first thing we're going to do is just kind of clean up a couple areas, just smooth out the skin a little bit right below the eyes and next to the eyes here. What I'm going to do here is create myself a blank layer because I want to put all my changes onto a separate layer. And then I'm going to come over to the toolbox and select the healing brush tool. The problem that we're going to have here is that if I look up in the top options bar, you can see sample is set to current layer, and that's what it's set to by default. If I were to come over here, and the way the healing brush works is you hold down Option on Mac or Alt on the PC, and you click to sample, and then you start painting. All right, and I'm painting, I'm doing all this stuff. Nothing is actually happening, and that's because I sampled from the current layer, and the current layer is this blank layer here. So what you want to do is change this to all layers, and what that'll do is it'll let Photoshop sample from whatever is beneath your cursor. So now if I hold down Option or Alt and I click to sample, and then I start painting, now it actually works the way that I think it should. All right, come back over here, do the same thing, sample, and then paint. I'm going to sample right next to the eye and then paint upward a little bit. And we'll do the same thing over here. Make my brush smaller with that left bracket key. And just try to smooth out a couple of these wrinkles here. Now, it looks kind of funky now. Let's take a look. This is before and that's after. So obviously, that's not very good, all right? We want our retouching to be subtle. The way you can work this here, especially when you're using layers, is take advantage of opacity, because now I can drop my opacity down, all right? And you see what happens here? See how I start to bring in the original layer underneath? So at 0%, it's like I did nothing. And I can just gradually build that back up and just smooth things out a little bit. I don't want them gone totally. I just want to smooth them out a little bit. All right? Next thing I would do here is probably work on just the little spot on her face there. It's not a problem being there. It's just I might just sample it with my healing brush, and I'll do it on that same layer because I dropped the opacity. I just want to lessen the effect. That's before and that's after. Again, we're just we're minimalizing some of the things. We're not necessarily trying to remove everything and remove all of her character. Okay? While we're on the topic here, I'm going to create another new layer, and I'm going to zoom in on her teeth. We've got just a tiny, tiny little spot right there, a little space. So I'm going to take my clone stamp tool from the toolbox and make my cursor really, really tiny. And the same thing happens here. Look at what we have under sample. It's set to current layer. Change that to all layers, and then hold down Option or Alt and click to sample. And now I'm just going to barely go in there and try to get rid of that as we back off. Yeah, we're not even going to see it. I might drop the opacity down just a little bit. Okay, let's take a look before and after. So a slight change, but it's all these little things that we do that start to build the overall photo here. The next thing we do is it's actually pretty big. Okay, and I'm going to show you a keyboard shortcut that comes in very, very handy. It's a long keyboard shortcut, I'll tell you that. It's Command Option Shift on the Mac or Control Alt Shift on the PC. All right, so Command Option Shift or Control Alt Shift, and then hit the letter E. See what that did? It created a merged flattened layer. So what we have here is all of our layers below it merged and flattened into one layer on top, but I still have all of my layers where I did my retouching in case I ever want to get back to them and maybe change something. But it did create a flattened copy of it on top for us. So now what I want to do here is I want to just kind of smooth the skin out a little bit. We're going to go up to the filter menu for that. I'm going to go down to blur. I'm going to use surface blur for it. And surface blur does a real nice job of smoothing skin. It keeps a lot of the details, but we're still going to have to go do some work later on. But this is a good start. I'm just going to hit it with a 5 pixel. Let's crank it up a little bit, see what happens here. But I think it's going to get worse as we take it up. Yeah, we're going to keep it back down here. 5 or 6 pixels is going to work just fine for this. All right, and then click OK. So it's blurred the layer. What we want to do is add a layer mask to this. So I'm going to go add a layer mask to the layer. And inside of that masks panel, remember how we can invert? And if you don't want to do it in the masks panel, you can just hit Command or Control I. But just click on invert. And what that did is it turned our mask black. So now it's like we hid all of our blurring. We didn't blur the skin at all because it's all hidden by the mask right now. So if I take a brush tool and I change my foreground color to white, now I can come inside here and I can start painting the softened skin back in. All right, see how we're doing that? Works really, really good at softening skin, but still allowing you not to soften all the details. And that's what we're after here. That's why we're using a layer mask, because now we can just go back and forth, zoom in a little bit on the photo here, take your brush size down with that left bracket key, and just get into some of those finer detailed areas right along the chin too. Let's take a look here. Everything's looking good. This is a perfect example to use that keyboard shortcut that I told you before, Option on Mac, Alt on PC, and click on the layer mask, because it shows you what the mask looks like. I know it looks kind of scary when you see it on a person, but that's before and that's after. So it's showing us the mask, and we can see any areas that we missed, like up here on the forehead and down here on the cheeks. All right, so it's a good way to be able to get inside there and see those areas. Just Option or Alt click again to get rid of it. I even missed some areas over here. Okay, and if you were going to spend some time with this, I'd make my brush smaller and try to get in here right above the eyes too, but we're going to do it really quickly. All right, and it always looks a little bit too much to me when I get done with it, and that's where we bring opacity in, and we just drop the opacity down. If we take it down to 0, it's like we did nothing, and then I just build it back up. I'll do that a lot, by the way. It's a little tip for you. I'll bring this all the way down to 0, and then I'll just build it up and see what looks natural. I'll just keep increasing the opacity until I get to a point where I think it looks natural. So I'll bring it down to 0 and then increase it. And I'll usually settle somewhere in the 50-60% range when I'm doing the skin softening technique. All right, let's see, what are some other things that we can do? We can create ourselves a blank layer here. We can take our brush tool with a white brush and use the left bracket key to make it really, really tiny and just paint over on the whites of the eyes. All right, I know it looks kind of funky, but I kind of like it this way. I think we're on to something now. What we're going to do here is change our blend mode down to soft light, and that blends it in pretty well, and then decrease our opacity again, just to whiten the eyes a little bit. And then the last thing I'll do here, maybe a little bit of selective sharpening. I'm going to use that same trick I did before. Command Option Shift E, Control Alt Shift E on the PC, and that duplicates the layer, but it leaves all of our layers underneath here. So it flattens the document, but it flattens it to a copy. And then let's go up to Filter. We'll go down to Sharpen, hit it with an unsharp mask here, hit OK. Let's add a layer mask to it, and I'm going to invert the layer mask just like I did the last time. And now let's just go in with the brush tool, paint with white, and just paint over the things we want to be sharp. Like maybe I'll bring in some more detail into her hair. All right, just like that. And probably just a little bit over onto her eyes. Take a look. Before and then after. All right, so you can see where layer masks and layers and blend modes and opacity, these things all start to come together. When we use them all together, we can really do some nice things when it comes to retouching portraits. And I'll leave you with one last little keyboard shortcut. I know I've left you with a million already, but this is a pretty neat one. When you're working in the layers palette, and what I'd want to see here is a before and after. So I could turn off each layer, right? Or I could just click and drag and turn them off too. But an easier way to do this is when all the layers are on and you just want to see one layer, just see the effects of one layer, just hold down your Option key on Mac or Alt key on the PC and click on the layer icon visibility symbol here, the little eyeball. Just click on it and watch what happens. It hides all the other layers that you did not click on, and it just shows us the original. So this is before and this is after. Again, before and then after. It's a subtle difference, but it is very nice, and you're able to get that before and after just with that little keyboard shortcut, Option on Mac, Alt on PC. Click on that eyeball, you can see your befores and then your after. So some pretty neat stuff when it comes to retouching. The sky's the limit here. You save this as a PSD document, and you're able to always come back in, change everything because you kept all the layers throughout the process.